You're listening to the Tony Steuer Podcast, where Tony interviews financial literacy advocates who are changing the conversation on money, so you can catch up on the latest trends and ideas in the world of financial literacy and education.
Welcome to the Tony Steuer Podcast presented by Paperwork. I'm pleased to be joined today by Kate Grayson. Kate is a financial wellness expert and the content director at Paperwork. Kate is also the founder of Beyond Money. Kate, welcome to the Tony Steuer Podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Tony. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. I can't wait to get into our conversation. As we start out, tell us a little bit about what is your origin story? How did you get started in financial wellness?
Definitely. So I came to this career completely out of personal need for a service, like with personal need for help with my personal finances more than anything. I used to work in a completely different field in the retail industry. I lived in India for most of my 20s. And then unfortunately in my late 20s got diagnosed with a chronic health condition that forced me to leave my job and become like an unemployed full-time patient. And so I went from earning, a nice ever-growing expat salary to suddenly not only not earning anything, but spending all of my savings and all of my money on my health. And I really began to experience firsthand the degree to which that, financial stress can eat away at every aspect of your well-being. I'd been fortunate to that point where, as an adult, I'd always earned enough and money, fortunately hadn't been a primary concern for me until that point. But then once I was dealing with my own financial stress, I naturally began talking to friends and family about it a lot more and began to see how many folks around me were dealing with this, huge financial burden that they felt like they really had no one to talk to, nowhere to go about it. Their lives often looked perfect on the outside, but inside they were very, very, very stressed around money. So that's where my, my curiosity then quickly became my work.
Well, that's great. Yeah. And that so often happens. You get curious about something, a little passionate, and it becomes much more interesting to work in that area. And, sorry to hear that you went through that. That's always, health challenges are never fun. But it looks like you benefited from it and you used it to, move forward with your life, which is exciting. But as we talk about that, because people don't often think about health scares and are not often prepared for them. Is there any advice, from what you went through that you would give to people so that they could be prepared for a health scare?
I think more than anything, just remembering that good health is such a gift and, it's not something that you can always count on. And I certainly don't think we all need to go around, preparing for details of every possible emergency that might arise. I don't want us to all be like paranoid people, but I think just it reminds me like how important it is to have your, sort of finances and your overall life like in good shape so that you're more prepared to weather storms. I was just lucky that fortunately I had saved a lot without putting huge focus towards it. I had a low cost of living and just higher income. And so I naturally saved, but it, I can admit now was not a concerted effort. It was just the extra money that I had. And I was lucky that I had it, but I so easily could not have. And, I don't really know what I would have done if I hadn't had that. So I think that just as early as we can, getting like solid emergency savings in place, starting your, one thing that was lucky for me was that my grandmother had started a Roth IRA for me when I was very young. So I already had some retirement savings going and, so missing out on, several years of that isn't fun, but it wasn't make or break, because that had already been going. So I think just as much as we can all remember that life doesn't usually work out in a perfect, linear path. Things happen. We don't know what they will be, but things will happen to all of us. And I think just getting all of our, ducks in a row ahead of time so that we can weather all these storms is important.
Yeah, well, I think those are good points. So it makes me think of that, saying man plans, God laughs.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
The other thing too is, I come from the insurance world, and, disability insurance is so often overlooked because people go, I'm young, I'm in my 20s, nothing can happen to me. And, unfortunately, you never know when something is going to happen. And so, like you said, it's, have your emergency savings, think about it, you don't have to spend all your life preparing for any potential eventuality, but do something, have some kind of safety cushion, whatever that means to you.
Definitely. One of my friends that I met, in the course of my treatment, she had, fortunately, again, it wasn't planned because she was also quite young, but she had worked in consulting before, and they just happened to have tremendously good disability insurance. And so she, for all of the years that she was unable to work, was receiving like 2/3 of her consulting salary, which was a much nicer way to go about this than some of the rest of us had. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's not something that most people in their 20s, 30s, 40s even are really thinking about, but it is certainly, paying that little bit amount every month really, really, really does come through for you when you need it.
Yeah, sure enough. So to switch gears a little bit, one of the things that, I've really enjoyed about your writing and everything is when you talk about balancing, so why is it important to seek balance in your life, not just with your bank account?
Yeah. So I think that we are so often, especially young women, are so often fed messaging that, the way to buy a house or have a secure retirement is through deprivation. We're told that the problem is not that we don't earn as much, but the problem is that we, buy the $5 latte, or that we, go and get a manicure or whatever it is. And it's different messaging than men get. Men are told to earn more, to invest, to, get investment properties, whatever it is. And women are told that their way to financial stability is through deprivation. And I just don't believe that. Like, I think money is only as useful as what you spend it on, right? Otherwise, it's always sort of a decision of, is this money going to be worth more for what I can purchase with it now? Or is its growth, and what I can buy with it in the future going to be worth more to me? And, I don't think that there's really any point in skipping everything that's, fun in the present just for some, mythical future reward. And obviously planning and saving and investing for your future, for your retirement, for your family, all of that is very important, but you still need to have fun and enjoy your life in the present. And that balance looks different for everybody, depending on their incomes, their priorities, their whole life circumstances. And it, changes a lot as we move through life. But at any point in life, we all have a dozen conflicting priorities, and it's just about finding a way that your budget and your life and your time and your energy can all, coexist in a balance of all your priorities.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Well, you hit on a couple very important things. One, just thinking offhand of the pink tax,
Mm-hmm.
that products are geared towards women are more expensive, just a starting place. But really, thinking about, financial advice is, I have heard the same things as, it does differ, the messaging for the recipient, and especially by gender. And so, what kind of advice would you give for young women? It's like, how do you change that narrative?
Yeah. I mean, I think that women need to get the same advice as men, which is that, your economic security comes through earning more and investing more.
Mm-hmm.
Raising your salary by $20,000 will do a lot more for your life and for your security than cutting out, $15 worth of coffee a week, and so and I think that, that can come through, increasing your salary and sort of all of that comes through more open communication about money. And again, it's a thing that, women have been told, that it's not ladylike to talk about money, that's, impolite and not appropriate. And so I think more and more that women can talk to not only each other, but also, the men in their lives and in their families. It really, really opens up eyes, to see that, you ask a male friend in a similar field as you, what do you earn? He probably earns 50% more than you, and so just opening up that communication so that women can start advocating for themselves better.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also incumbent on the men in the financial services industry to also share in this task. I mean, because women still earn 80 cents on a dollar as compared to males in the US.
Yeah, something like that. I can never remember the exact figure. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably depends on who, which study you read, but whatever study you read, it's still less, and that's just shocking. But it's reality, and we need to deal with it. And I think your advice for women is important, is to, find a financial advisor or insurance agent or app or whatever that speaks to you equally.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the beauty of a fintech app like Paperwork, who we both work with, is that an app is gender agnostic to some degree, where a financial advisor may not be.
I mean, I think it's a reality that most of the financial advice has been created by and for white men of a, certain economic level. And that is alienating advice to most other people, and I think that we all need to accept that, a white male financial advisor might not be a safe space for a woman or for a person of color, and I think it's incumbent upon, then men in the industry to hire people who come from, other identities and other backgrounds, so that there can be, more and more, sort of safe spaces for people to go to in the industry. And I think that you're right that, apps like Paperwork or other ones out there can do a lot to make this advice and information accessible for people who might not feel comfortable, calling up a financial advisor or an insurance agent, instead that they can, turn to something that doesn't feel as intimidating to get the advice that they need.
Yeah, well, you point out, the heart of the matter is the financial services industry was created by white males to serve white males, and surprise, it serves white males.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're seeing that with people like yourself who are coming up non-traditionally in the financial services community with a different message. And I think that you're shaking things up, and other personal finance coaches and people are coming non-traditionally, and people are attracted to your message because you're speaking to them. You understand where they're coming from. You're able to relate to them, and that's quite often what makes a successful advisor-client relationship or coach-client relationship, is that ability to be able to bond and relate to the other party. So
definitely.
that's
and I think for
stuff.
something as intimidating as finance, it really, really helps to be able to speak, just as a person, and to not use all of the finance, lingo and jargon, and just, come back down to earth and speak to people in just plain English about concepts that frankly aren't all that complicated. Most of personal finance is really not that complicated, right? But it's made to feel like none of us are smart enough to figure it out, because, the industry has traditionally thrived on making it feel complex and unapproachable. But I find that, when we're able to just bring it down to a more reasonable, lower common denominator, it starts to make a lot more sense for people.
100%. And I think that most people in the financial services industry will agree with that. And oftentimes, also agree that even people in the financial services industry don't truly understand all the products and services because they're overly complex to serve the need. Like, I come from life insurance, and you look at some of these life insurance policies and they operate, part of it is based on an index, and then they have 4 different ways that the interest is credited, and all these, but really you're talking about life insurance. Pretty simple. Someone dies, you get a benefit. That's everything else is just a complexity built upon that. So
Definitely.
I hear you, and completely agree. And I think people also hide behind their jargon. As well. So it's easy to do is say, hey, I know this and you don't.
Definitely. It feels a lot more, it can feel a lot more fun and exciting as the quote expert, making people, making it feel like you're, the one person that understands this, and I can see why, it can feel more comfortable to sort of, hide behind that.
100%. And, and it even goes beyond finances, oftentimes in the medical field or the legal field. I mean, oftentimes there is a need for some complex, expertise, but most of the time, like you say, in anything most stuff is relatively simple at its core, and most people can pick it up if they understand the rules, they know where to get the education, and they feel like you said, is that it's approachable for them and something for them to do. Is because I've talked to so many women and they say the same thing, is that they just feel like the financial service industry, and not putting words in your mouth because you did not say this, but it can feel hostile.
Yes, definitely.
Almost and unapproachable. So, I think that leads into this question really well is, one of the things you talk about is that money doesn't feel easy. Why do you feel that money never does feel easy?
We just put so much weight on it in our society. And obviously money's tremendously important. It's the building blocks of everything in our world. It might not buy happiness, but it certainly buys the means to access happiness. It buys comfort, it buys time to visit your family, it buys dinners with your friends, it buys the things that we rely on. And yet it also is made to sort of be a replacement for our worth. If you don't earn much, you are insecure about your worth. If you earn a lot, you feel like, okay, well, now my life should be perfect, but why do I still feel unhappy? We just put such a weight on it, and it can be very hard to then sort of look at it in a digestible way, because when you're putting all of your anxiety and your family history and your success and your achievement and your sense of self-worth, all of it on this one, dollar amount sitting in your bank account, it's impossible to look at it in a sort of rational, analytical way. And so I think that part of it comes from sort of separating your emotions from it, but part of it comes from accepting your emotions behind it. And that's something that's, working with folks one-on-one really important to me is taking into account their feelings around money. There's not ever, we could have 2 completely identical people that earn identical salaries, that have identical debt, that live in, identical cities, but their financial decisions will and should be different from each other, because my feelings about my debt might be completely different than your feelings about your debt. And the right plan for me or the right plan for you is what will make us feel most supported with our money, that will let our money sort of be our friend in our life as opposed to our, antagonist. And that means that, the right plan, path, decisions are so different for each of us, which is why I think that so much of the just boilerplate financial advice out there is not useful to people, because then we're left feeling with one more thing, to feel stupid about. Like, shoot, I just read this list of 10 things I should do with my money and I can't do any of them. So what's wrong with me? Why am I so stupid? And it's because those things aren't relevant to you.
Yeah. Well, you hit on a number of things that I completely agree with you. The money shaming, making people feel bad about not accomplishing certain things, the difference in, our goals, because, both of us could be striving, both of us are saving for retirement, but I'm willing to bet that my dream retirement is probably different than your dream retirement. And
yeah, and frankly,
everyone's right.
Yeah. And I don't think much about my retirement, honestly, in my early 30s. I think that, again, this is one of those things that finance can get so caught up on is retirement. And obviously that's important. And at a certain point in your life, it's something that should be a primary focus of planning towards. But in your 20s, 30s, beyond hopefully maxing out your 401k, what more really is there to it? Then you should really just be, enjoying your 20s and 30s and living, building your life. Right. But I think people get so caught up in planning for, what they should be doing in 40 years that they forget that, when you're 25, you should be enjoying being 25,
100%. It's funny. I had a guest on recently, Thomas Koppelman, who's the financial advisor to millennials. And we talked a little bit about, and he's a millennial himself. And we talked a little bit about FIRE and, the whole fascination with FIRE. And, he pointed out something really well, that I would imagine you'd agree with is that, why, when you're 30, are you giving up everything else for retirement? Not enjoying being 25 or 30.
Definitely, and I have nothing but respect for folks that want to, put so much of their, dedication and resources towards achieving a goal. I think that's wonderful, but I do think that our obsession on constantly deferring and delaying gratification for these future rewards, for example, I saw with my health struggles that I could have easily not had a retirement, I could have not survived, and so it's yes, you have to plan and prepare for your future, but you also have to live and enjoy your life right now, because all we know is that we'll have today and hopefully we'll have tomorrow and next year and 10 years from now. But, we got to strike a balance. It's not all about retirement.
Yeah, well, I love that. Strike a balance. It's where we were before. And just for our listeners, I forgot to clarify this on the last episode as well. FIRE means financial independence, retire early. Just in case you're listening and curious what the heck FIRE is, that's what FIRE is. So Kate, one of the things you talk about is resetting money habits. So how can someone reset their money habits?
Yeah. So I think with this, one of the most important things to start doing is not forever, but just for a little while, track your spending, and really manually track everything that you're spending for a few months and see where your money's going. Most people I have worked with are quite surprised to realize how much is going towards things that don't feel aligned for them, perhaps loads of delivery food or just random purchases on Amazon or whatever it is. And those are the things that we can and should cut back on, whatever feels like it's not important to us. If you are, I always use groceries as an example, because people always ask me, how much should one person spend on groceries? And I say that there's, no answer, because, for example, I love to cook. It's my biggest hobby. And I buy, really expensive farmer's market, local $20 honey type stuff. And so my grocery bill is much higher than somebody who maybe doesn't love to cook, eats out a lot, travels a lot for work. Maybe I'm spending 3 times more than them, but that's because it's something that I care about and prioritize. And instead, maybe they're spending more money on travel than I do or whatever. So I think that just observing your spending habits I really cannot overemphasize how much that can do to create change. And I find that most people are able to cut back their spending by about 30% or so without trying, just by being more aware. And I'm not talking deprivation. I'm, still buy and spend on the things that are important to you, but observe your spending and you'll naturally cut back then on the things that don't feel so important to you.
Yeah, no, that's great advice because, sometimes you do spend money on stuff and you go, yeah, I could really cut that out. Almost you have to apply the Marie Kondo principle in advance. Am I really going to be using this? I have a teenage son, and so it's like he always wants to get the newest game or the newest skin or whatever. And, we have that conversation with him. It's like, okay, well, are you even going to want this in a week, or are you and all your friends going to have moved on to the next game? And, that stuff, that same principle.
Definitely. I mean, it can be hard to cultivate that sense of, awareness to your spending patterns, to know what things like really will hold, and maintain value to you, and which things, you could have easily gone without and would have forgotten about in a week anyway. You're so right.
100%. Well, and I think the other thing that you said it's so important is, just that relativity is between you is what brings you joy is cooking with those ingredients and having those meals. And so that's a part of who you are and how you're choosing to live. And, for somebody else, they may be fine with top ramen 3 days a week, but that's not really for everybody, the choice. And so there's I think probably the biggest thing here, there's no right answer. It's exactly what answer. So that's why you have to analyze your own spending, as Kate points out. You have to track your own spending, see what's working for you. So I also want to ask you, one of the things you talk about, I think this is so important, is why is values-driven spending important?
Yeah, because again, it gets you back to spending on the things that matter to you. The word budget gets a bad rap, but it's really just a spending plan. It's sort of pre-planning, predetermining how you want to spend your money. And we feel better when we're spending money in ways that feel aligned to us. And that doesn't mean, the same thing for everybody. For some people, that means, supporting local businesses, and they're happy to spend more on groceries if it's from, a local mom and pop store than if it's from, a big chain. For some people, it means, I want to spend my money on experiences and not possessions, so it doesn't really matter what your quote values are. What matters is that you are doing the internal work of like interrogating what matters most to you and then spending accordingly. Because in, a capitalist society, as cliche as it is, you do vote with your dollars, and where and how you choose to spend your money is really the best representation that we have of what matters to you.
That's great. I think that's so important is, to think about your dollar and where it's going, and does it match up with who you are and how you want, like for me, I'm into books. And so I try to support, unfortunately, there's not many of them anymore, as I try to support local bookstores.
Yeah.
Rather than buy my book through Amazon, if we're in a bookstore, I try to buy the book there, even though I know I'm paying more, just to support the local bookstore. And
definitely. And, and then you can feel good, and sure, maybe your book budget ends up costing you $50 a month more than if you had purchased everything on Amazon. But it's something that, if that's important to you, it's something that you can then feel good about. And most people are happier to have spent that extra $50 on things that are of import to them than saving $50 on things that you don't feel as good about.
Yeah, 100%. That's great advice. So, Kate, as we wrap up, what is your number one tip on financial wellness?
I would say that my number one tip, at least the one that's coming to my head right now, I'm sure I'd have a different answer a different day, but is, putting aside money for your financial priorities first. So whether that's contributing to your 401k, building emergency savings, or paying off debt, automate that, whatever amount that is, whatever percentage of your income it is that's feasible to you, get that done first. And then the rest of it doesn't quite matter so much. If you're, maxing out your savings and paying down your debt, it doesn't really matter if 1 month you spend a lot on eating out and the next month you spend a lot on groceries. Then it's just about you living your life, but you already know that you've taken care of your, financial security. And then you can enjoy the rest guilt-free.
Now that's important, and I'm hearing that a lot from a lot of people is, that automate the savings component, get that first part started. And it's funny, one of the most successful life insurance people is, that's what he always used to say, pay yourself first.
Yeah.
Before you pay everybody else, think about putting that money aside.
Definitely. And then I'd also add in to just get in the habit of saving, even when you're young and your income is lower. It's maybe when you're 22 and you're in your first job after, you graduate, $50 a month is all you can put towards savings, but just getting in the habit of doing that, because then when your, income rises, as it will rapidly in your 20s, probably, you're already in that habit, and then you can just keep upping the amount, but you're not then needing to learn how to save for the first time.
That's great advice. And, I don't think there's many people in high school who are listening to this, but if you have kids in high school, it's never too early to start saving. That's wonderful advice. So Kate, where can people learn more about you? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So the best way is on my Instagram. I'm at Kate E. Grayson. So yeah, you can catch me there. I try to, I'm not always the best at being active, but I do respond to messages. So feel free to reach out there.
Fantastic. And is it okay for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, for sure. I'm at just Kate Grayson on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And for everybody who's watching or listening, I'll be posting links to Kate's profiles in the show notes. So Kate, thanks again for coming on the podcast.
And thank you so much for having me, Tony. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, this is fun. And for everyone watching or listening, thanks for tuning in to the Tony Steuer Podcast. Until next time.